Next on Currents News, vandalism at a Brooklyn church. A statue not only broken, but dragged into the street. I'm Tim Harfman, and I'll have more.
I came into this job with one mission, and that was to fight crime and keep everybody safe.
New York City's top cop, James O'Neill, is turning in his badge. President Trump is demanding the impeachment whistleblower go public and testify. At the same time, he just lost an appeal to keep his taxes secret.
Charitable giving across the country is declining, but here in the Brooklyn Diocese, it's alive and well. I'm Emily Drewby, and that is ahead.
Plus, a big turnout of Catholics in the Brooklyn Diocese. They're attending field masses to remember all souls who've returned to the Lord. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. The man who launched a violent attack at Brooklyn's Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church is being charged with a hate crime. The suspect went on a rampage before dawn Sunday, stomping on a statue of Saint Jude in the middle of the street and ripping up flower beds from church grounds. Tim Harfman begins our coverage in Williamsburg.
The NYPD arrested this man for an attack on a Brooklyn church, and they're calling it a hate crime. The violence happened before dawn Sunday morning at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Monsignor Jamie Gigantiello is the church's pastor. He was on his way to Mass when he realized something was wrong.
I looked on the floor and I saw all the plants were on the floor. And I said, we didn't have a storm last night. I said, I wonder what happened.
That's when he checked his security cameras.
He actually took the plants, threw them at the rectory door, started screaming at the camera.
And Monsignor Gigantiello says after that, he walked down here to the statue of Saint Jude, ripped it off of its pedestal, and then dragged it into the street. But that's not all he did. The man stomped on the statue and left it in the middle of the street.
A couple of cars went around it, but one guy stopped, got out of his car, and there was someone walking, and both of them picked up the statue and they put it back on the pedestal.
According to the NYPD, 34-year-old Michael Gold-Watowski was arrested and charged with criminal mischief as a hate crime. Despite the attack, Monsignor Gigantiello forgives him.
We could talk and try to say, why are you so angry at the church, and maybe we can make peace.
Monsignor also wants to acknowledge the passerby who helped.
If they would just identify themselves, I would just like to personally thank them for doing that.
The statue of Saint Jude cost $5,000, and Monsignor Gigantiello plans on buying a new one. In Williamsburg, Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
President Trump's accountants are being ordered to turn over 8 years of personal and corporate tax returns. He's fought hard to keep the documents secret, but this morning a federal appeals court ruled that Trump's accountants have to give the returns to Manhattan prosecutors. The president argued that he's immune from criminal investigations, but the court decided that since Trump's bookkeepers were subpoenaed for the records, his immunity didn't matter. The president also has another demand tonight. The whistleblower who touched off the impeachment battle on Capitol Hill should testify in public. Daryl Forges has the latest.
With the impeachment cloud looming, President Donald Trump is demanding the whistleblower's identity to be revealed. In a tweet Monday morning, the president said in part, the whistleblower gave false information and dealt with corrupt politician Schiff. He must be brought forward to testify. Written answers not acceptable.
The whistleblower should be revealed because the whistleblower gave false stories.
Some House Republicans, like Mark Meadows, are pushing to have the whistleblower testify in person.
I can't imagine that Chairman Schiff would allow written questions and answers for all of his witnesses.
This all comes while the president and his allies deal with impeachment proceedings and investigations into the president's phone call with Ukraine's president.
Foreign policy is not designed for the benefit of one person. It's designed for better world order. It's designed to further the goals and objectives of our country and our allies, and this did not do that.
Meanwhile, 4 White House officials subpoenaed by the House Intelligence Committee are not expected to show up Monday for their depositions in the impeachment proceedings, further angering Democrats.
To be no-shows. This will only further add to the body of evidence on a potential obstruction of Congress charge against the president.
Daryl Forges, Currents News.
Tonight, despite the impeachment battle, there's good election news for President Trump. 1 year away from the 2020 presidential election, he's looking very competitive in several key battleground states. In the 6 closest states that went Republican in 2016, he's either leading or tied with Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. Recent polls are finding that Trump's been gaining strength in those states. And the first test for the Democrats who want to move into the White House is getting closer. Voters in Iowa will soon make their choices known. Arlette Saenz reports that the contenders are beginning to turn on each other with heated attacks.
With the Iowa Caucuses 91 days away, a pair of national polls released Sunday show Biden with a clear lead, while a third gives the former vice president a slight edge over Senator Elizabeth Warren, but within the margin of error. Recent polls in the first 2 nominating states also find a much closer contest. As the 2020 race tightens, Biden is challenging the Democratic Party's progressive wing, preaching a pragmatic approach to governing.
But they all talk about how, yeah, Joe was always able to get big things done across the aisle. But things have changed. Can't do that anymore. Well, folks, if we can't do that anymore, we're in real trouble.
One frequent target for Biden, Medicare for All, the proposal written by Bernie Sanders and backed by Warren.
I just think getting that plan through, even a Democratic Congress, will be difficult.
As she defended her plan, Warren leveling her own critique of Biden.
If anyone wants to defend keeping those high profits for insurance companies and those high profits for drug companies and not making the top 1% pay a fair share in taxes and not making corporations pay a fair share in taxes, then I think they're running in the wrong presidential primary.
That comment prompting the former vice president to push back.
Some of the opponents want to very much characterize views in terms of whether you're thinking big, and if you criticize something that you think is outlandish, you must be a Republican.
Also in Iowa this weekend, Pete Buttigieg, who's seen a boost in recent polls and is pitching himself as a pragmatic alternative to Biden.
I didn't just come here to end the era of Donald Trump. I'm here to launch the era that must come next.
That was Arlette Saenz reporting. The Democratic hopefuls will square off in another debate later this month. President Trump is making it official. The U.S. is pulling out of the Paris Agreement on climate change. The White House telling the United Nations that America is withdrawing from the deal. The action begins a year-long countdown to the U.S. exit. Nearly 200 nations endorsed the agreement to cut down on greenhouse gases. Turning now to the wildfires that have devastated California. Tonight, most of them are at least 70% contained. But firefighters are still working on a blaze outside of Los Angeles that is threatening more than 2,500 homes and businesses. Experts are warning the risk of new fires in the state will continue this week, while President Trump is threatening to cut off federal aid for fire recovery. He's blaming California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom for doing, quote, a terrible job at forest management. The Diocese of Lafayette is stepping in to help out 3 churches destroyed by arson in Louisiana. The diocese donated $50,000 to 3 historically black Baptist churches after the houses of worship were burned down earlier this year. The funds were raised by a diocesan-wide second collection during masses in recent weeks. The accused arsonist Holden Matthews is awaiting trial on federal and state hate crimes and arson charges. Despite the good news from Louisiana, fewer Americans are giving money to charity. According to a new study, millions of families are no longer opening up their wallets for people in need. And their relationship with God may have something to do with it. Currents News' Emily Drewby has the story from Long Island City.
Hiya, Carol.
Every day, Jeffrey Smith sees the importance of donations from a food pantry to a daycare and even a thrift shop. The lifelong Catholic sees giving turn into a helping hand or an opportunity for someone in need.
That's really what motivates me.
He works for Our Children, a Queens-based nonprofit that helps incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women and their children. It's just one of over 1 million nonprofits in the country relying on donations to stay afloat. But those donations are decreasing. The percentage of Americans giving money to charity has dropped from 60% 66% to 53%. It's a statistic Jeffrey has seen firsthand.
It doesn't come as a surprise to me. I think the challenge for organizations like us is to continue to do what we do with passion and with integrity, so that we continue to inspire people.
But Sister Tisa, who runs Our Children, says despite the national drop-off, they're still in really good shape.
We are testimony to people's goodness.
That's because there's so many ways to give, from donating old household items for their thrift shop to time.
We have endless amounts of volunteers who really make the world of Our Children happen.
The recession and a lack of extra cash among millennials are cited as reasons for the decrease in giving. Volunteering is a great way to get around that.
Why would you look at another person and say, you're not worth my time?
The study also points to the rise of the nuns, people with no religion. They are less likely than people of faith to give.
Jesus said very clearly, look to the less fortunate. And not only did he say it, that's what he did.
As the season of giving approaches, Sister Tisa says even giving a little could mean a lot. In Long Island City, Emily Druby, Currents News.
New York City's top cop is calling it quits. Police Commissioner James O'Neill is leaving the NYPD after 3 years running the largest police force in the U.S. He's taking a private sector job. O'Neill talked about his time in charge at City Hall this afternoon.
I came into this job with one mission, and that was to fight crime and keep everybody safe. I think that's one mission. There might be two missions, though. And we did it, and we continue to do it. I've been doing this job for almost 37 years now. I love being a cop, and I consider myself a cop as the police commissioner.
The new police commissioner will be Dermot Shea. He's been on the force for 28 years, most recently serving as chief of detectives. Up next on Currents News, exclusive stories that can only be seen right here. Field masses at Catholic cemeteries in the Brooklyn Diocese will tell you why the turnout was so large. And Pope Francis goes underground in Rome. He's in the catacombs for a holy reason. It's the place that welcomed huddled masses yearning to be free. In just moments, we'll explore the significance of Ellis Island in America's history. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. They wanted to celebrate Mass with their loved ones in their final resting places. So hundreds of people went to Catholic cemeteries on All Souls Day. Tim Harfman has the story of one from Middle Village, Queens.
On this All Souls Day, standing room only, as hundreds remember those who have returned to the Lord.
Today you celebrate this special day for all our family and friends. I have to pray too for the people nobody remember.
To make it possible, Brooklyn's auxiliary bishops celebrate outdoor field masses at 5 Catholic cemeteries. Family and friends are there to be close to their loved ones.
It's their bodies, the arms that held you and the lips that kissed you and everything, and that's really what you're coming back, because you know that their souls are in heaven.
It's moving.
Wilford and Ann Furlong traveled from Long Island to remember his parents. They passed away more than 4 decades ago.
Graciously grant her peace and unity.
Auxiliary Bishop Paul Sanchez celebrated Mass at St. John's Cemetery in Middle Village, Queens, Saturday.
We gather with our loved ones and pray that they rest in peace and pray that they are able to intercede for us, and as we, the Church on earth, continue to look forward to the kingdom of God.
Flora Wisawek is visiting the cemetery's mausoleum, where she prays for her husband, Steve. 5 years ago, he lost his fight with cancer.
My husband, 22 years married. This always I come in here for praise my husband.
Thinking of her husband during Mass moves her to tears.
This is a special man in my life.
Flora and everyone at the St. John's Field Mass are grateful for the All Souls Day opportunity to pray for the faithful departed. In Middle Village, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Over in Rome, Pope Francis celebrated All Souls Day in the city's largest catacomb this weekend. The Holy Father revealed that it was a historic Mass for him, his first underground.
La prima volta nella vita che entro in una catacomba è una sorpresa. Anche ci dice tante cose.
Pope Francis explained that the catacombs remind him of those who die for their faith and those who suffer for their beliefs today. He also said that the tombs remind him of 3 other ideas: that Christian identity has been the same throughout history, the hope all have in heaven, and how all Christians have a place in the hands of God. American Catholic leaders are rallying behind the Dreamers tonight. The U.S. Bishops' Conference, Catholic Charities, and others are pressing the Supreme Court to support DACA. The program protects about 800,000 young people from deportation and allows them to work. The undocumented kids were brought into the U.S. by their parents. President Trump is trying to terminate DACA. The Supreme Court will take up the case next week, and the Catholics are filing papers arguing in favor of the program. Next week will mark the 65th anniversary of the closing of Ellis Island in New York Harbor. It was the location where immigrants yearning to be free first arrived. Joining us to talk about the port of entry significance is Stephen Briganti, the head of the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation. Stephen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
What role does Ellis Island play in the American story?
Oh, it's a big role. It's the story of welcome. It's the story of opportunity. It's the story of new chances, a new life. About 40% of the population of the country living today can trace the roots of one or more ancestors through Ellis Island. So it's that very important place in America where new arrivals came.
When Ellis Island was open and bustling with newcomers, some Americans didn't want them here. How is that immigration experience similar to today?
Well, that's not unusual all through history. There were times when people wanted immigrants to come because they needed them to fill the jobs in the Industrial Revolution, and then they didn't want them to come. This is not unusual in the history of our tradition of immigration. Although we are a nation of immigrants, there are times we close the door.
Well, so we're remembering the closure of Ellis Island. Can you tell us why did it close?
Well, it closed because it was no longer needed. It was a huge facility, and people stopped coming by ship, were coming by plane, and also the interrogation of the immigrants was done in the embassies abroad, as opposed to having this gigantic operation going on in New York Harbor.
And so does the U.S. need another Ellis Island?
Well, it has another Ellis Island. It's called JFK and LAX. I think those are, along with other ports of entry, are the primary new Ellis Islands.
Well, and the island's also home to a museum. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it is. We restored Ellis Island, and in the process of it, which took about 20 years to do all that we've done, we built a museum that tells the story of American immigration, really starting in 1550 and coming up to the present day. Also, it makes it possible for you to come and search your manifest records of your family as they came through Ellis Island.
And you told me that we could also do that online. Can you tell people how they can search for their relatives?
Go to ellisisland.org. You've got to know the name that they registered on the boat with, not what it might have become when they got here and 7 years after being here became citizens and changed it.
Do you have a favorite story of someone who came through Ellis Island?
Yes, I do. When we were first doing the Ellis Island Museum, we didn't have any artifacts. They were all gone. So we had to advertise. And we advertised in one issue of AARP. And we got thousands and thousands of responses. But the one that I think the most of is a lady who had come from Sweden. Wrote, and she sent in a pair of boots. And she wrote with a letter with it that said, these are the shoes that I walk to freedom with. So that has always stuck with me as sort of symbolic of really all the immigrants.
Now your foundation also works with the Statue of Liberty.
We do.
There's a museum there that you told me about. What can visitors expect?
Well, we just opened this museum in May. It's really a great museum. After 9/11, the number of people coming into, being allowed to go into the Statue of Liberty was limited. So we decided that it was important to build an educational lesson around the Statue of Liberty, its history, what it stood for, how it got here, and we built this new museum. Your listeners should definitely come and visit it.
Stephen Briganti, the head of the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Still to come on Currents News, why Jimmy Carter is telling a church service that he's completely at ease with the future. And a 3D designer has uncovered the face of a saint by accident. And please check out one of the latest features in the tablet, the Our Diocesan Family page. That's where you can send in photos of your family receiving certain sacraments, such as baptism, first communion, confirmation, and marriage. For more information and to submit your pictures, go to thetablet.org/OurDiocesanFamily. We'll be right back. A brave Jimmy Carter didn't let a broken pelvis stop him Sunday. The 95-year-old teaching Sunday school at his church in Georgia after suffering the broken bone in a fall recently. The oldest living former president told the over 400 people in attendance that he is at ease with the idea of dying and believes in an afterlife. Carter has been teaching at the Sunday school since he was in his teens. The ability to uncover the face of a saint is thanks to modern technology and a little bit of good fortune. Rachel Dobrinsky reports how St. Catherine of Genoa was discovered.
3D designer Cesare Amores knew only 2 details about his upcoming project. He was tasked with a facial reconstruction while knowing only that his subject was a European woman of around 50 years old. Upon finishing this assignment, he learned the surprising background of this woman. His unexpected subject was Italian Saint Catherine of Genoa. She lived an unhappy life until she had an encounter with God that led her to serving the sick in a Genoa hospital.
I was very happy to know that the skull was Saint Catherine of Genoa. A considerable part of my family is descendant from Italians and Catholics. I am always honored to reconstruct faces.
The reconstruction of St. Catherine's face was completed in multiple steps, including photographing the skull, digitizing the face with photogrammetry, and finding statistical data to construct the different shapes that make up the face.
To know the thickness of the skin in some points. It was necessary to reconstruct the mainly muscles of the face to make some projections. For example, the nose structure using the nasal bone information and the size of the lips by projections from teeth and eyes.
The reconstruction of the saint was presented at the Museum of Genoa's Capuchin Cultural Heritage, done in partnership with the ARC Team Research Group in Italy. The facial reconstruction sparks curiosity not only about the life of this saint, but also the advancing knowledge experts have of ancient times. In Rome, Rachel Dobrinsky, Currents News.
Finally tonight, Christmas at Radio City Music Hall kicks off this Friday when the Rockettes take the stage for their famous show. But before that, the dancers join together in prayer.
Let us pray. O God of every nation.
Cardinal Timothy Dolan dropped by before rehearsals today to bless the animals from the show's living nativity scene. The head of the Archdiocese of New York says the prayers have become something of a tradition at Radio City. The scene of Christ's birth has been the Christmas Spectacular showstopper since it started in 1933. That is Currents News. I'm Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.